Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk Classics, a show where we take old episodes of Turned Out a Punk that have been lost from the internet and return them to their previous glory by sticking them back on the feed. You can find this podcast on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and all other forms of social media. Well, that's pretty much it. At Turned Out a Punk. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Left for Damian. I play in a band. More information can be found at fuckedup.cc. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy another TOAP Classic.
I get it.
Jonah, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is such a thrill.
No, thank you, Damian. I'm happy to be included in this kind of esteemed group of people you've had.
Well, I think you are someone that I think, obviously have gone on to other things, podcaster, musician, writer, whatnot. But you come from a very special place in my heart, which is your punk story begins, I don't know, not to put words in your mouth or anything, but kind of, or formative years, I guess, were Cleveland hardcore, right?
Yeah, totally.
Oh.
I grew up in Cleveland. Yeah.
We're going to nerd out today, my friend. It's going to be, this is going to be one of those ones where people are like, or I'm probably going to wind up talking about pressing numbers of 7 inches and stuff. I have a feeling. So.
No, I love it. Like I said, I told you before, it's my favorite thing to talk about. So I'm happy to do it.
Well, I've repositioned my microphone. I brought my Cleveland, Ohio 7-inch section over just so I don't forget anything to talk to you about and stuff. And let's go. I guess, Jonah, how'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you heard it or came in contact with it?
I remember my first show, and it was, this is a pretty crazy lineup. It was Melancholy opened, Life on a Plate, and then Good Riddance was touring on Forgotten Country, and Down by Law, All Scratched Up era headlined.
I remember that show in Toronto on that tour.
So that must have been when,
95 or 96? 96, maybe?
Yeah, probably something around there. So I don't remember exactly how I got into punk, but I remember, my first couple shows were that, Rancid and the Wolves Come Out tour. And I think I was taking guitar lessons at this place, and there was, this record store, Disc Den. This was, in the suburbs of Ohio, and I would just go there after my guitar lesson and buy cassettes, because at the time all we had were cassettes, and I would buy whatever, Black Flag My War, or NoFX Heavy Petting Zoo, or whatever was out. And I think I got through it then, and then I would just start going to those kind of shows and making friends. And so I think that's sort of how I got into it, I guess.
Was there do you remember where you would have first seen it growing up? Did you see it before that, just on TV or anything in magazines, or was it? I guess you and me are the same age from the sounds of it, because those were a lot of my sort of formative shows as well. So it was kind of part of that punk explosion, right? The post Green Day wave where you were finally exposed to this stuff kind of on the radio and on TV.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember going, I remember when Dookie came out. This is such a weird, I remember that was probably my first real punk show, even though it was at an outdoor amphitheater. But I don't know how this happened. I couldn't even drive yet. But my friend's mom, this sounds insane now, actually. My friend's mom rented a limousine to take us to this Green Day show. And all of our parents pitched in on it. I have no idea how much it cost. It was me and 5 guys, and one dude had purple hair. I had weird black dreads, and we went to this Green Day show, and the limo just waited for us. And people were throwing mud at them because it rained, and it was Sam I Am opened, and then on the way back we were just moshing in the back of the limo, and the driver was yelling at us, and we didn't care. So that, I guess, was my first show. But I think through Green Day, The Offspring, Bad Religion, Stranger Than Fiction stuff, when that stuff was on MTV a lot and kind of mainstream radio, I guess that was kind of my entry point into the Epitaph, Fat Records kind of world.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe you didn't consider that Green Day show a first punk show. Sam I Am opened even.
You're right. That was actually my first punk. And then they tried to play another show in Cleveland, a radio festival, and I got dropped on my head crowd surfing to Collective Soul.
Oh.
I think this actually a Canadian band played. Do you remember this band Moist?
Oh my God. Like you act like, do I remember them? They were, at one point, they were our Beatles.
Yeah, they had that song Push that was like
Push, just a
all over
little
the
too
radio.
late. Is that what you
Yeah,
want? Is that what you need? I think, Jonah, you, my friend, because you didn't go full distance, David Usher, the lead singer of Moist, had quite a solo career after it.
really, I didn't know that.
Well, Canada's kind of like the Europe of America. There's all these people that you just hear bits and pieces of, like Roxette, and then you were like, oh, they actually had like an insane career too. And that's like Canada with some of these artists. So Moist, was Push actually, was it just border proximity, or did that get like airplay on like MTV even? Or was it
It
like,
got airplay on MTV for sure. I
wow.
remember the video was like this black and white kind of performance thing. But yeah, it was on the radio. But yeah, they played, and then Green Day was supposed to play, and so many people showed up that they were scared people were going to riot, so they wouldn't let them play.
Wow, that's crazy. And you
Yeah,
got, and Collective Soul too. I guess that's
yeah.
like,
Which no, go ahead.
no, I was going to be like, that's the radio rock period of the time.
Totally. Yeah, it was so weird because all these kind of punk, like you'd go to, I remember going to a big radio festival and it was like, like the Ramones would play, but then it would be like a bunch of, then like Smash Mouth or whatever. It was like there was so much weird kind of crossover during that era, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think maybe that also speaks to how cool radio would have been, at the time.
Yeah.
Like, not that I'm a huge Smash Mouth fan, though I do bear a striking resemblance to the singer, kind of. Like there's like, just like, it's kind of like, Smash Mouth smashed up against the Ramones, smashed up against Collective Soul. Actually, it's not sounding as good as I thought it did in theory. No, I'm actually
No, I know what you're saying though. Yeah, all these kind of now classic kind of punk bands were played on the radio. Which I guess I don't know if it happens now. I feel like every time I turn the radio, it's like Alice in Chains Rooster or something.
Just like as like a young person, was there an acknowledgement locally at the time during sort of that punk resurgence of like all the crazy Cleveland punks that like first wave stuff that had happened there? Like, was it like, the local radio station being like, hey, Green Day, well, check out the band that started it all. Here is the Dead Boys.
Not really. I mean, I mean, maybe there was, but not what I was listening to. Like, I didn't really get a sense of that. I didn't find out about that till kind of later.
That's what I was wondering. Like, was that like, because like I didn't obviously know about it at the time, and I found out about it much later myself. But locally, was there an appreciation for it, or is it like, was it also? Yeah, I guess it's like secret knowledge there too.
Yeah, I mean, not really. I mean, like, people. Yeah, people like love like Rocket from the Tombs and all those bands, but you didn't really, I mean, maybe I was just too young, but yeah, I never heard about that. It was like all kind of like local guys, like classic rock guy, like Michael Stanley and like these kind of people that I think never really were popular outside of Cleveland, were really big in Cleveland, but you didn't really get a sense for that stuff, I guess.
And I guess back to that fateful Millencolin Down by Law Good Riddance show. It's amazing when you think back to that show. Like, Millencolin was the opener, I think, right?
Yep.
And they were probably at that time huge in Sweden. Like, huge.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they were like the Weezer of Sweden.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they won. I might be totally off on this, but I'm pretty sure they won like Swedish Grammys.
That's wild. That. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, they played. I had a ponytail with the sides of my head shaved. I stage dove. It's a great. But there's a lot of bands like that. Like Fat Mike was telling me how like High Standard like sells out like arenas in Japan.
Yeah, there's actually a High Standard like headlined festival that happens, I believe, in the summer there. Like my friend Greg, the guy from Mishka, who owns Mishka, he like posted a photo from the side of the stage. And it was like, I'm like, oh my God, it's like my fantasy from when I saw High Standard as a little kid. Like, imagine this band was huge, how cool it would be.
Right, totally.
I actually went to the high school with the lead singer of Millencolin's cousin. And so I got to meet him at that show.
Oh, wow. That's rad. Yeah. I feel like really my gateway into a lot of these bands was that Survival the Fattest Volume 2.
That was a killer compilation.
Right?
Unbelievable compilation.
Yeah.
And it's funny that was like only, they must have sold truckloads of those things because it was so cheap at a time when CDs were so expensive.
Yeah, you're totally right.
So where did you kind of go from there? Like, what was sort of the first sort of local stuff you began experiencing? Like, was there a local pop punk scene in your
I
like
mean,
Cleveland in their area?
there was. I mean, there were a few bands. Like there was this band, the Beatnik Termites, with this guy. I think they did some stuff on Lookout.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember all the ads in Max and Rock and Roll too.
yeah. So they were like, they were kind of older. I mean, basically, I just started like playing with like we would go hang out in Coventry, like by where the grog shop is. It used to be like on the other side of Coventry, and just like smoke cigarettes. And then I started meeting kids from other schools, and we would just start a band with like we would just play like Misfits and G.G. Allen covers and stuff. And I feel like through that, I started meeting people, like other people in bands, but
Where
I
did
didn't
you
really
get into
know.
G.G. Allen? Sorry, before I can't let you go on. G.G. Allen's like you were pretty young to be into the Geege at that point. Where was the exposure to that coming from?
I think someone gave me like the band in Boston with the Jabbers, the Volume 1, and I still listen to it a lot. Like I feel like G.G. Allen's so fascinating to me because like obviously his later stuff is so crazy, but like that early stuff is basically just like kind of like pop sort of.
Pop punk. It's like minus the lyrics, which at times are still abhorrent.
Right. But it's
the
very
music's
musical.
Incredible. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's almost like the Nerves.
Yeah, totally. So we would cover like whatever Hybrid Moments and like I Want to Fuck Myself and like and like that kind of stuff. And then through that, I think I kind of got into straight edge and hardcore through meeting people and going to those kind of shows. And then that was kind of what I was into for a while after that.
Do you remember your first sort of local shows that you were going to, or like some of the local bands that kind of like spoke to you more?
As far as like hardcore bands or
like hardcore
or
punk, even like some of the first stuff, like once you kind of like, graduated that stage where you were actually starting to go to some sort of local stuff a little more.
I'm trying to think. I mean, there was this band, Ascension.
Okay.
They were on Toy Box Records.
Yeah, I totally remember they had a record on Toy Box. What did they have a 7-inch too?
They had an EP called Years of Fire, and then they had a full length called Abomination.
Oh man, okay, now that's gonna be on the list.
And both of them are great. Their guitar player Matt went on to form another Cleveland band called Chimera that were like big metal band.
Yeah. Oh, I totally heard of Chimera too. Yeah.
And their drummer Craig, who played on Abomination, was in my band later, The Love Kill, who are on Eyeball.
Oh, crazy! So that's so that was like sort of the first local band that you kind of got into, I guess.
Yeah, I really like them. Like they were kind of like metallic, kind of hardcore, but like they were awesome, and they were from my neighborhood. So like I remember they played a show in Matt's basement in this Chagrin Falls, Ohio, the suburbs, and they played with Catharsis.
Whoa!
And it was just in a basement, like just donate. And I remember this dude from Catharsis was like, we should like bomb a bank or something. And like some girl in the audience was like, what? And he was like, you got a better idea? Like, it was incredible.
I would like, honestly, how there's like, and it's not really, I guess, as much of a thing now, but a couple years ago, there was those stage banter records that were coming out with like Paul Bearer stage banter. And, there's that famous one that Forced Exposure did of Slayer stage banter back in the 90s.
Oh, right.
Someone definitely has to do a Catharsis stage banter record.
Dude, it was incredible because I feel like people don't talk about that band. I remember also going to like some kind of zine convention and those guys like taped up the money slots on all like the Coke machines and stuff because they're like, this is corporate shit, like don't buy it. Like those guys, because they had the whole crime thing.
Yeah.
Like that was really, really subversive, at least to me. Like at that time, I was like, "Whoa, this is like really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff."
And they're like also they're like a fascinating band. I'm so glad you brought them up because like I love they're like there's so many contradictions too because there's like also that weird association they had with the Cleveland scene and like some of the more or the less subversive lyrically elements of Cleveland hardcore that he would put out on compilations and stuff. Like,
right.
Like Crime Think, was it Thought Crime that came first? The label?
I'm not sure.
I think they did the Apartment 213 Gehenna split or the second press of it. on their on the label. But even like Apartment 213, like you look at the lyrics of that band, and it's like not necessarily jiving with the political worldview of Catharsis.
Yeah, no, God, I haven't thought about that band in so long.
Oh, they will come up today, my friend. They will come up today. But yeah, like, but it's also, but you're right. That was like for myself, probably my introduction to a lot of sort of radical thought and especially direct action, was like
Totally.
through these people.
Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, being in the suburbs, it was like, I remember I bought a bunch of zines from those guys. Yeah. And then Ascension played. And, yeah, so those are like sort of like the formative, I guess. Like there's another band, Chalkline from Cleveland.
Oh yeah. They were on a they were on a comp too, right? Like with Death Threat, I think.
I don't think so, because they were kind of more like metallic-y emo, though. They were very part of, what was that band from? I think they're from Canada. That band like New Day Rising.
Yep. That was maybe that's what I'm thinking of. New Day Rising did a split with them.
Maybe they were like very similar to that kind of very like emotional, but like really like weird metallic-y distorted guitars. Like I remember them playing like festivals with New Day Rising and those kinds of bands.
Yeah, like the spaz out on the floor.
Yes, exactly.
90s vibe. So when you get into straight edge at this point, what was sort of the were you like, had you drunk and like smoked weed before that and all that sort of younger stuff, or no?
Sort of, yeah. I'm not like one of those people that had like never done anything, but I also wasn't like I think I had like drank once and gotten like when I was like 15 and like in the woods with my friends and like thrown up all over myself. And then I think I had like probably like tried smoking cigarettes and like smoking weed. Like, I guess it's a good, like, I don't have a very addictive personality, so I would just sort of do stuff and then I was like, whatever. So when I hadn't really done a lot, and I think I got into straight edge when I was like 16 or 17. And I don't know how this happened, but I started hanging out at this tanning salon, Some Believable Tanning, in Mayfield Heights, Ohio, that was owned by Mean Steve, the singer for One Life Crew. And I don't even totally remember how I met them. I'm like racking my brain.
Was it at shows? Like, would you have like run into them at shows?
There was this guy, Joe Bando, who I was in this band Provoke with.
Did Provoke put out any records?
I don't think that dude, Matt from Ascension, a couple of Ascension guys were, no, they didn't put out, they recorded at Spider Studios, which was where One Life Crew did American Justice. A lot of Cleveland bands recorded at, and I remember I was going off to college and they were like, everyone's got to pay $40 for the studio. I gave the money to go in the studio and then they kicked me out of the band. Which is like the most Cleveland thing to do. Like I couldn't even be mad.
You're like, well, I'm out of this town now, at least.
Yeah. So whatever. But no, we didn't record, I don't think, but he was really good friends with the One Life Crew guys and had known them through like Confront and all that stuff. And he was older than me. So I think he introduced me to those guys. And then I don't know if I wrote about this. I think I did. My first out-of-town show ever, like I remember asking my parents. I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, and it was me and my best friend, this guy Dan, who's probably smaller than me. And it was, John Lockjaw, who were both enormous. We're way bigger than they are now. Like, and this was like the prime of like, they were wearing like Tommy Hilfiger, like, just like so politically incorrect. And I remember I was like, asked my parents, I was like, can I go to an out of town show? And they were like, it was only an hour and a half away. They were like, yeah, sure. So we were in the back seat and John Lockjaw like sat in the seat and broke the seat. Like, I'm not exaggerating. And it was like, oh, he broke the seat again. We went to the show. It was Ignite. I can't remember who else. And we walked in, which was just basically like, yeah, none of us are going to pay. Like, and talked his way in. And, we hung out there. I met a couple people. I was in band. I met this guy, John Millen, who I played in this band really early on. I played in this band Committed that those guys were in.
You were in Committed?
Yeah, I never played on any of the records, but
did you tour with them or like? Oh no, I guess they came up to Toronto after the 7-inch, right? Yeah, they would.
yeah, this was kind of that same era where I was like, I went to school in upstate New York, and this was kind of that era where like I was leaving town. But the first committed started was this guy John Millen, who was in the band the whole time. This guy Matt Scarpetti, who's in it, and then it was John Lockjaw, and we would practice in my parents' basement.
Oh, that's crazy. You know, Committed is like, that is like a pivotal band in Toronto. Like, Committed was the band that kind of came here and like No Warning when they were still As We Once Were. And Mike from Fucked Up, his old band with Ryan, who was in later in No Warning. Like, they would open for Committed and we would just like look up to them so much. They were like the coolest band. And I remember one dude in Committed had a jacket with a Final Exit patch. And, Adam Gill, who like used to hang out, he's now a big techno concert promoter in Toronto, like big concert promoter, period, in Toronto. And he's like, yeah, Final Exit sucks. And the dude's like, actually, I think they are awesome, and shows him the patch on his back, and it just broke his heart. I remember just watching his heart break. It was awesome. Anyway.
The singer for Committed, Casey, like now is like a producer on this big sports radio show in Cleveland. It's like on the air.
Really? That's crazy.
Yes. Yeah,
so that explains. Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, that's it. But yeah, it's pretty, like, he's like, you know, like my dad loves sports, so he'll be listening to it. And then like somehow my sister's name came up when like Trainwreck was coming out, and Casey was like, oh, I know Jonah. Like, we used to play together. So it's pretty funny.
That is too funny. The reason I'm like, kind of, if anyone in yourself is hearing me dodge in and out of the microphone, is I'm trying to find my Committed demo tape, but I can't seem to find it.
Oh, wow. I don't even know if I have one of those. I remember their first show, and they printed out the lyrics and handed them all to the audience members so we could sing along.
That is awesome. That is like some totally unintentionally inspired by Los Crudos shit, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it's so funny now.
That was like a big thing, though. Like, if you played in a youth crew band, you had the moment you knew you had made it was when you had the people, even if it was just your friends, singing along.
Yeah, and there was like a big scene with that in Cleveland. Like, some of those guys from this other band, Set Straight.
Absolutely. They shared members, right, with Committed?
Yeah, they shared members with Committed, and then that band, The Love Kill, I was in. This guy Chris, who I think played bass in Set Straight, was our singer. I played with him later, but yeah, they shared some members. I think John was in both of those bands, and then. John,
and you're forgetting about one other band that's part of that trilogy, Grudge Match.
Of course, yeah. My friend Brent was in that band, the Jockums. Yeah, we used to play. What band? I guess. Oh, I was in this band we also never recorded called Do Respect.
Do Respect.
And yeah, we had this guy, this bass player who was like this awesome dude, this Puerto Rican guy who was like probably 6'3". Everyone called him Chops, and we would have a breakdown. I don't know how he did this. We would have a breakdown, and he would do a one-handed cartwheel with his bass. But we would play with them all the time, and we would practice at Brent from Grudge Match's house because he had a drum set in his basement. And I was in another band. My first band, one of my first punk bands was called, it was with Mike and Nate, who went on to play in Integrity. And we just played one show, and we played the same song 3 times in a row.
What? You had one song?
We had one song, yeah. And I think it was
what
Brent.
The song was called?
God, I can't. It was like very FYP inspired, but also kind of heavy. And it was, that was Brent from Grudge Match on drum, or Nate. It was some of the Grudge Match guys and some of the guys from, like, Mike was in Gordon Soley, and then he was in Integrity. But yeah, those guys. But I can't remember what it was called.
Mike Jockum?
Yeah, Mike Jockum.
Yeah, I know the Jockums now.
Okay, yeah, I grew up not far from those guys, and so like some of my first shows, I took Nate Jockum to like his first punk show ever. It was MXPX.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he was like this like kind of pudgy like 13-year-old or something. He was younger than us. But yeah, so I grew up with Mike and Nate, and I used to play with them a lot, like really early on.
So you have that's your direct lineage to Integrity. I find everyone in Cleveland that's involved in hardcore is always one member removed from being in Integrity.
Yeah, that's it. And then also for my senior project in high school, I worked at this record store called Ultrasound Records.
Yeah.
And the owner, Gary, was really good friends with Dwid. And I did my senior project there, and then I worked there for a couple summers, I think. And Dwid would kind of come in once in a while. I had him like sign one of the Those Who Fear Tomorrow. Do you remember when they reissued it on like in these like red things on like different colors?
Yeah, Toy Box did the pressing, right? Like where,
Yeah.
and it was like they did the red. The red's the first press, and then they did a second pressing where they had like kind of a white cover
Yes.
for it.
Yeah.
Too.
So
Yeah.
I had the red one, and Dwid signed it to me like "Release the Fiend," release Jonah. Like I still have it, but yeah. So he would come in the store, and that was sort of my connection because he would kind of come in once in a while, and he was, yeah.
That's awesome. Was that like a weird? Was it kind of like an esoteric kind of video store type thing, or was it like a Blockbuster type video store thing?
No, it was the record store.
A record store. Sorry, I thought you said video store. I'm thinking about
Yeah, it was a record store, but it was like very like, you know, like just like selling like bootleg VHS copies of like shows, bootleg T-shirts, like, and then like they had a really, really extensive metal selection. And I don't know if you remember back then, like metal CDs were so expensive.
Oh yeah,
it was
all
like
CDs
insane.
All
yeah,
CDs, except punk.
Yeah, punk stuff was cheaper, but I remember because I guess maybe because a lot of that metal stuff was imported. But yeah, people would just come in and buy like 4 CDs and it'd be like $150.
There was a black metal record store in Toronto, like 1995, 96. That was above a deli, and it was just like like $50 CDs. But the guy was able to sell enough to make it worth the deli's while to let him keep the store open. Actually, I think his dad owned the deli.
Totally.
But I actually just hit pay dirt, and I have now holding in my hands my Grudge Match demo and my Committed demo.
Oh my god, dude! I am very impressed.
The Committed demo is awesome. It's on dumpstered cassettes, like it's taped over old cassettes, which makes it very punk. And number 2, the layout's incredible, and they also have a Clevo stomp on the demo. So that is amazing.
You got to have a Clevo stomp.
You got to have a Clevo stomp. Yeah. So this is the Committed Edge 1998 demo, which is I tell you, I'm going to have to throw this on afterwards with a hot.
Yeah, you should. yeah, you totally should.
So at this point, do you kind of like? Are you going to all these sort of like Cleveland shows? I get also, what was the reputation of One Life Crew in Cleveland? Because like outside of Cleveland around this point, like they were the villains.
Right. It's so weird because I was not super self-aware. Like I was sort of just getting into this and I was like so young that I didn't really understand. Like I guess I got into them sort of right after they got kicked off Victory. I wasn't at the show with the Riot. But I remember kind of hearing about it, and
you've seen the video obviously several times since then, I imagine.
I've probably seen the video. I'm probably responsible for like half the YouTube views.
Yeah, I've seen that video. I think I'm the other half because that video. And actually, I know like Posy Rich, like the dude who got like punched, and it's so crazy when he's trying to punch him. Apparently, like so many people are trying to punch him that he just fell to the bottom of the pit. And like got out of there and didn't really get hit by anyone because it's just like so many people are trying to beat on him at once. in that video, it's crazy, but
it's wild. But yeah, so yeah, I was hanging out at me and Steve's tanning salon, and those guys were. I know they had a really weird reputation, but they were so nice to me. Like they would, drive me to shows. They would like tell me about all these rev bands, like. Whatever, Chain of Strength, like all these bands I didn't know about. And then I would go see them play a lot. And I think I wrote about this in that article for Noisy. Like, I didn't understand like anything. So like they would go on stage and they'd be like, fuck the liberals. And I would be like, yeah, like, and I had no idea what a liberal was. Like, I didn't even know what it was. And they would have these kind of like conservative politics, I guess. And they would say a lot of stuff, but you would kind of hear stories about them and integrity, like not being able to play outside of Cleveland and all this stuff. But I never really witnessed anything. Like I feel like, and Cleveland has this super reputation of violence. and I saw a couple things, but I feel like other cities were way more violent from I spent a summer when I was 17 in Boston going to shows at the Middle East, and like every show I went to that like they'd have to stop it like 5 times like for fights. Like I'd go see like whatever Anal Khan or like In My Eyes or whatever, but those shows to me were much more violent. But yeah, I sort of got into it through those guys, and I would see One Life Crew all the time and play with them. And yeah, I didn't really know how they were perceived outside of Cleveland, really.
Well, Mike from Fucked Up is one of the original Fugarios.
No way.
On the website, yeah, he was like actually like listed as one of the Fugarios and stuff.
I love how dated some of this stuff is now, because like on American Justice they have that line where like, we're taking out the Nerdarios and the Fugarios on AOL.
I wonder, like, I guess this leads to the question, like, obviously you're a younger person. These are adults. Were they self-aware? Like, how much of this was when they realized they were getting a reaction, and this is the 90s, reaction is key. Were they just like pushing buttons, or how much of it do you think was part of just their culture of who they were?
That's a really good question. I mean, it's so hard to say. I will say that, Steve was a really smart guy. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like there's this perception that they were sort of like just these like meathead, like racist, like, but I mean, from my experiences, like, I know he had like went to school for like political science, and to me, like, I think they sort of believed in a lot of those politics, but I also think part of it was to get a reaction, and I think a lot of it was sort of a reaction. Those guys came from, Chubby Fresh was in Integrity, like Steve was in Confront, Mean Streak. They were in like these real like first wave kind of hardcore bands. I think a lot of it was a reaction to the other bands on Victory, like Snapcase and Earth Crisis, and sort of this whole vegan, like, I think that whole thing was so opposite of what they had gotten into hardcore for, and I think a lot of it was sort of just let's react to that and let's just see how far we can push it.
Mm-hmm. I guess like there was also Cleveland had like so many different scenes at this point, and a figure who looms large that I want to get into in a second, Tony Erba, when he was on this podcast, I think he said it there, or I've heard him say it other places, that Confront was ruined by Dwid. Like when Dwid showed up and got involved in those dudes, that's when everything changed. What was there? Did they still have a relationship with Dwid at the point you were hanging out with him, or is that kind of gone?
I don't really know. I mean, like, Erba, I didn't really know super well, and I feel like that stuff was a little before my time. Like, I know, like, I would see Gordon Soley, and then I saw actually one of his bands, John who was in Committed and Set Straight, was in a band with Tony. I saw actually play in New York, like probably like 7 or 8 years ago when I first moved here.
What was his band before Fuck You Pay Me? Oh, it's killing me now.
It had like a girl on the cover, like a mugshot.
And Chris Callahan from Cursed and everything put out that 7-inch.
Okay, yeah.
I'm trying to remember, and it's in a different box. God, I can't remember that. Okay, well, I'll fix that. I know the band, but I'll fix that in the intro for this episode.
Yeah, I can't remember that either. But yeah, so I don't really know about his relationship with those guys, because I didn't really know Erba very well.
No, I meant Dwid. Sorry, Dwid's relationship. Was Dwid still around the OLC guys, or did you just meet him mainly at the video store? Like, was it also factioned, I guess?
I mean, like, because like OLC was such a weird band too, because they would like talk about like being friends, and then I'm sure you're familiar with like Pit Boss 2000.
Oh yes, oh yeah.
And like I think originally they were called Prohibition 2000.
Yep.
But so yeah, they would, and then like so like John would like leave One Life Crew and like start a band that just like talk shit about everyone in that band. So it was like very hard to keep track of like who was friends and who like hated each other, because the guys in OLC hated Dwid.
Yep.
And like, so it was very confusing.
Well, that's like, I think, like you talk about, like Cleveland not being a violent city, and I think, there's not as much sort of like open violence, but there is this sort of like personality violence of people like hating certain people like so much, like so much, but they also like used to be best friends.
Yeah, there's was just so much shit talking.
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere. And I've never been around another scene where people are so specific about it. Just like calling, like, like that Pissbox song, like Hardcore Loser, which I think was about Tony, where it's like 28 years old and you still live in the attic.
I think
Like, like that was that. And then like they would write songs about each other, and it was, yeah. And then like they had that whole sample at the end of Humanity's the Devil, where they were just talking shit about Dwid.
Yeah.
So it was just, there was so much of that stuff. But then you would go to a show and everyone would be friends again, and they'd have a new band. So it was like, and what I really liked about Pit Boss, I don't know if you saw, I just recently did an interview with John, who was in Pit Boss.
I read it.
Yeah, and what I liked about him, he does comedy now and kind of has distanced himself from that stuff. But it was super un-PC, but I think it works better in comedy because, like, you can sort of get away with a lot more of that stuff.
Well, and he's such an interesting, like your interview, definitely covers this. He's such an interesting person because he like stuck around and also like tried to be involved with kind of like the next wave of the larger hardcore scene. Like he was a big message board poster, like, into the 2000s on like the Bridge 9 board.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like I remember he would like post on there, and actually we played with a band of his that was like that Metallic Threat band, where he had the Metallica Minor Threat cover band, where they would wear wigs.
I didn't even know about that either.
Yeah, in San Diego, because he moved out to San Diego. And,
right.
And we played at the Che Cafe and I'm like looking at this band, I'm just like, it's crazy because I think that's the dude from Pit Boss 2000 up there wearing a wig. And then after he came up and he talked to me, he's like, yeah, I played in Pit Boss 2000. I'm like, yo, I know. I'm like, I didn't introduce him to Mike that night. I should have. That would have been like a full circle meeting.
Yeah.
But,
well, what's cool about those guys, like looking back on it now, is like, I interviewed John for this thing. It's like all those guys, I feel like, really like kind of like got things together. Not they didn't have things together, but they really moved on from that and are like functioning like adults who are like, not just like talking shit, and like they all have like good careers and families, and it's like, it's just kind of nice to see because I feel like Cleveland is a place where you can sort of get stuck sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely, and punk is a place you can get stuck sometimes too, right? Like, not stuck in the way that like, you should move on from the music, but just like you can get caught in your past glory and trapped in that forever.
Yes, absolutely.
As someone who's trapped in his past glory and stuck in it forever now.
Tell me about it.
So you, I guess at this point, you're playing in Committed and you're kind of moving like on, like, should you go to college, you said?
Yeah. So I went to college, Ithaca College in upstate New York. And, yeah, it was pretty crazy. I don't know how I met a couple other straight edge guys there, and there was a pretty decent scene because this guy Ron was doing this zine Muddle. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I totally remember Muddle. I've got a bunch of issues of Muddle.
Yeah, so they actually did an issue my friend Sarah was on the cover of, where it was like kind of like this weird like Dawson's Creeky like photo shoot.
Okay. Oh, I'm picturing that cover.
It was all girls from our college and guys, and it was like, this was the era where everyone was wearing like headbands and like. Anyways, I went there, and there were like really good shows. Like they would just set up like this guy John Ziga, whose brother Jeff was in like a bunch of bands with like the Painted Black Guys, I think. But he would set up shows at his house, and like I remember Ink and Dagger played, like Discount, all these cool bands. And then I started setting up shows, and so I would set up shows for like whatever. Like I remember doing like a Piebald show, a Cave-In show, all this kind of stuff at this club, The Haunt. And through that, I met this guy Ross Siegel, who did the zine Law of Inertia. And I started doing reviews for him. I had never really written before, and then I kept getting more into it. And eventually me and Ross had started it in San Francisco, but eventually I started co-editing the zine with Ross. So that's kind of all I would work on like the last 2 years of college. I basically just worked on this zine, and we'd put out like 2 a year, but they were huge.
Yeah, definitely. I know the zine.
Yeah, so I would just go to shows, interview people, take photos with like a disposable camera. And yeah, so that's sort of how I got what I did kind of in Ithaca, like basically kind of just set up shows. And I was also in like a couple bands that no one never played outside of Ithaca.
Well, before you moved on, I wanted to go back to, mention Discount and Ink and Dagger, which are two bands that, yeah, like Ink and Dagger, I guess people have gone back and talked about, and there's only so much you can do given certain members have passed away and stuff like that. But like,
although Jeff did do that reunion stuff with them.
Yeah, Jeff did the reunion stuff with them. I mean, but like as far as like them, I was just going to think that band's so underrated. I keep coming back how underrated I think that band is musically.
Yeah, it's, we did a tour, United Nations, my band now, we did a tour on the West Coast with this band Sick Feeling, and that's Don from Ink and Dagger. And yeah, he still does this thing, which is like, he would like set up 2 amps and have like an Ink and Dagger and have like just a tiny bit of delay between them.
Yeah.
So it sounded like 2 guitars, and I feel like he does it now. It sounds cool. I think a lot of people do that, but yeah, he was doing that like in like the 90s.
Yeah, they were like, I don't know, just like vibe wise, like everything. It was almost like they were, especially for that period of hardcore, too much imagination.
Yeah, like, no, totally. Like, yeah, I agree.
It wouldn't like I could own like like you're carrying a fucking coffin to the stage. Yeah, right, buddy. No thanks. Like, oh, you got like some weird effect on your guitar. No thanks, buddy. Like, and also Discount.
Yeah, I didn't.
Sorry. Go on. No, go back to Ink and Dagger. Let's go on about it.
Yeah, no. I mean, I never saw them during like the Vampire period. I just saw them like Fine Art of Original Sin type stuff. But
which is a killer record.
Yes, it is. It's so good. I have that somewhere on blue vinyl. I think I bought from them.
I regret it. I remember being at a show and a guy was selling it on blue vinyl, and I was like, I got it on CD. I don't like it that much. And then now I'm like, fuck! It's gonna haunt my dream. You were, I don't know. You held on to all your records? You're still a record collector, or no?
Yeah, I'm not as big into it now, but I never got rid of anything.
Yeah, it's a disease, and it plagues my. All these records I didn't buy haunt me every day.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I do have actually like I think close to 40 Integrity 7-inches.
Whoa. You might have some stuff that I don't have then. That sounds, we gotta go through your,
I mean, probably the rarest thing I have is, I'm trying to think, I have the Victory and Contrast to Sin on blue.
Yeah, what's that on blue? I don't think I've ever seen a blue vinyl version of that.
I bought it from the store, Ultrasound. It's the most I ever paid for a record. It was $40.
That's, wow. Also, I wish I could say that $40 is the most I ever paid for a record. I think my wife definitely wishes I could say that.
I also have the, that like Septic Death thing that like Pusshead did the art for?
Yeah.
I have the reissue of that, but I also have the original one.
The one that came in the book?
Yeah, the Blood Book.
I was going to actually say, did you ever pick up Blood Book, or like what were some of the fans, or what was that other fanzine that used to come out of Cleveland that was like so awesome in the 90s? Ugh. God, I can't believe I'm blanking on this now. What were some of the zines that inspired you as a writer early? Or were there any zines that inspired you as a writer? I guess.
I mean, really, like, I feel like I didn't really get into. Oh, I really liked this zine. What was it? Regression.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was out of Boston or something.
Yeah. They had a guy screaming into the microphone on the cover. It was like a black. Well, obviously, that's every zine ever. I think I can picture that cover.
Yeah, that sounds like very likely. But yeah, I didn't really get into zine stuff till school, and then I was just really influenced by Muddle just because those guys were there.
Yeah, and it's that's a fantastic zine. Like that is like an unbelievable zine still.
Yeah, it's not bad. And then just whatever, like Punk Planet or just the typical kind of stuff.
And also, I wanted to talk briefly about Discount. That's another band that, I guess maybe because, members don't want it to be, but I'm just surprised that band hasn't had that great reissue done yet,
Well, I think a bunch of, I still actually talk to their drummer, Bill. He like does something with like bike lanes. He got in touch with me about, because I interviewed him about it. I did something for Alternative Press where it was like, best records from like 10 years ago, and I interviewed him, and the guy who put it, so those records were on this label New American Dream, and that guy like was so nice. I can't remember his name, like maybe it's Tim or something, and then he kind of just completely one day was like, I don't want to do this anymore, and just left the industry. And yeah, I guess Allison, like, I think someone told me, I can't remember who it was, someone in like a pop punk band said they ran into her at like a festival and was like, oh, it's such a big Discount fan. And she was sort of like not into it.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But every time I've met her, I've just been like, maybe it's just like, I'm just like, yo, Discount. She's just like, I'm not going to get into this with this guy about not wanting to talk about it. So we'll just talk about it a little bit type thing. But yeah.
Oh, really? You've talked to her about it?
Yeah, like I like just brought it up to her. Maybe we haven't gone deep on it or anything like that, but like the Kills are another band that like is they've got some amazing punk legacy between Discount and Jamie. Also had all like there's something crazy like he had some well obviously he's involved with Hardskin, but like was gonna do something with Hardskin, like put out a record or something like way back when.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like Jamie, I forget the name of he had like some, British punk indie type band too. And he's like an old punk guy from way back when.
Interesting.
So, deep cuts of the Kills.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see. Yeah, they were really great band. And that, what was that record with like the, like Half Fiction?
Yeah.
That record is fantastic. And then they came out with the one after it that was like more kind of like almost like Fugazi-ish.
With a face on the cover? Is it her face on the cover of that one?
The next one, it was like kind of had like a dark cover.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember that cover.
I can't remember.
I also I got their first 7-inch 2 tours ago, and it's killer too.
Yeah, and then they had that Billy Bragg thing. They had that split with As Friends Rust. Like, they were a great band. But I guess you kind of get the vibe that she doesn't really want to talk about it. And I wonder with bands like that, like, is it ever too, like, are they too obscure and it's just too late, where it's like, how many people really would go? I don't know.
Yeah, like I was this actually brings up something I want to talk to you about, because you're kind of like in the same world that I am, someone who is obsessed with the punk rock paths of some people and stuff like that. It's weird when you encounter those people that don't like to talk about their paths involving punk rock. Like we brought up Ink and Dagger. Eric Wareheim, not really a fan of digging up that point in his history, I found.
How was he involved with that band?
He was the drummer in Ink and Dagger, or bass player. Oh God, now I'm fucking up. But yeah, he was in Ink and Dagger in the first lineup.
Really, I never knew that.
Yeah, he's in the first lineup of Ink and Dagger, and then he was also in Elements of Need. And then like he like every time I see him, I'm just like, yo, Ink and Dagger. And then he's always like, yeah, it was like some dark times in that band. And I'm like, yeah, I can imagine, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean though, because for me, it's like that I'm so nostalgic of all that stuff that I love talking about it.
No, me too. It's like my bread and butter.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I guess maybe like, maybe if like people have like weird associations, or like I can only imagine like what it was like being an Ink and Dagger. And then I mean, like it must have been fucking insane.
The stories you hear, and he says like we were not very good people at times and things like that. And it's like, yeah, for the stories you hear, I can imagine. Like that, maybe not One Life Crew level of infamy, but the legends definitely are around from the 90s about that band.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm sure. But yeah, I do think that's kind of weird. And I always think it's like, I would think it's weird when people from punk like break through into like, not weird, but when they start doing like mainstream success stuff, because I'm always like, oh, I thought you were just part of this like weird insular world that I was a part of. And now you're like super successful and that's great. But I thought that this thing was so like, not like, you know what I mean? I don't know how to articulate it.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. Like it's just like, oh, crazy. Like, I don't know. I think the first one for me was when, the Roots had that like hardcore song. I can't remember what record it was, but it was like a punk hardcore song on a Roots record. And someone's like, oh yeah, the guitar player's like some Philadelphia hardcore kid. And it was like, really? Like in the Roots, there's a hardcore kid? And that was like when I was like, oh yeah, like people can go on from these scenes to do other things. Like they don't
totally. Yeah. Like who we had on the podcast, who's a perfect example of that, is Fred Armisen. Like that dude knows so much about music, even like newer bands, like loves like the Screaming Females, all this stuff, but is also like so successful at all this other stuff, is a great drummer. But yeah, it's really interesting to see people go from that kind of world into the mainstream, and kind of like, yeah, some people seem to really embrace the past, and some people just sort of move on, it seems.
Yeah, I guess it totally depends on, what your experiences were, right? Like at the time, like I've had friends that have tried to talk to Joan Jett about Darby Crash, and she's like, yeah, he died. And then it's like kind of the end of the conversation. Like, and it's like, oh yeah, that's probably a very painful memory for her to go back to and think about. So, I guess it depends on like what someone's associations with that era were, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm like yourself. I'm just so nostalgic about it, and Fred Armisen, like when he was on this show too. And it's like one of those things where here's someone that had like almost like 3 lives when you think about it. Cause like not only was he in Trenchmouths, like this huge, like kind of like, not huge, but like formative, I guess, in that genre of 90s music. He was also in, this entire giant celebrity world of comedy that he's in now. But then he was also in a New York hardcore band before that. So that's almost
really?
like, yeah, he was in this band KGB that featured members that would go on to be in Reagan's Youth and go on to be in other bands. But they put out, I believe, a tape that was eventually reissued as a 7-inch. And they played shows opening for like GBH at the Rock Hotel and stuff.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, it's like, it's so weird that like there's all these like, it's like, I think you're right, like how people get these second acts, and like it's like, but you were so famous to me as just the lead singer of this band that would play to like 70 people in a basement. How can you also be now famous worldwide?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so funny.
The dude from Grade was nominated for a Grammy. Like one of the dudes that was in Grade, like one of the later lineups of Grade recently.
Really? They were also one of my favorite bands during that era.
They were like, so how was it that's very interesting, because like that to me seems so separate from the One Life Crew world. Like it seemed like, was it like, could you go to both shows? Like, was that allowed? Like, I don't know if that might sound like a ridiculous question, but I just like the One Life Crew legend looms so large. That the idea of them existing in the same world as Grade is just unbelievable, but they did.
They did. I mean, like, there was some kind of like ruffled feathers. I mean, I feel like, but like, like that was the Grade, and that kind of stuff was kind of at odds, but I was kind of into both of it, like I remember seeing the Grade on that Separate the Magnets, Hot Water Music Forever and Counting tour like 4 times. And those are still probably 2 of my favorite records ever.
They're another band that also like they like, it's amazing how much music they kind of, set the groundwork for. Great.
Oh yeah. Totally.
And Hot Water Music.
Yes, definitely. And so I got to do, I mean, I feel like a million people did the liner notes for that, that Save for the Mags reissue, but I got to do that. I've done the liner notes for Those Who Fear Tomorrow, one of the 4,000 reissues of that.
You did?
Yeah, for the 15th anniversary, I think it was on Fractured Transmitter.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I have that. I got to get that reissue with your liner notes now.
Yeah, I wrote it. I was on tour. Yeah, I did that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like One Life Crew and those guys were not into anything deemed like new school, anything that was like screamy. But I mean, I feel like for me, like that was like a more relatable scene because everyone was sort of my age and like, you know what I mean? A little bit more.
Not as angry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was really, but I remember like, yeah, it's so weird. Like I remember, I think it was like a Pit Boss show or maybe something like, there was an article about straight edge in the local Cleveland newspaper. And one of those, I can't remember which Cleveland band, but one of those types of bands, like, put it on, like, this bulletin board at their show, and we're just, like, talking shit. I mean, it was, like, it was such a weird scene to grow up in, because I was like, oh, this is normal.
Yeah.
And then I went to college, and everyone's like, dude, what?
Outside of the Cleveland bubble, it was just like, what's going on there? Like, what is that? What are the shows like? And I guess, but yeah, like you're like, there is also the other side of the hardcore scene that was going on at the same time, but that was such the dominant part of the conversation.
Right. And yeah, so I was in the middle. Like I would go to one show and people would be like, like veganism, blah, blah, blah. And then I go to like one of the more Cleveland bands and they'd be like Tupac would be shot and they'd be like, only in America can a common criminal like Tupac be heralded as a hero. And you're just like,
God.
I mean, like, for real, like, I can't remember one of those bands, but yeah, it was like that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, this is just like normal stage banter, because if you have no point of reference and you're sort of, especially when you're new to that kind of stuff, you're just kind of soaking everything in.
Those are your peers. Like, those are the people that shape what you think punk is at a certain point.
Exactly.
So I guess, like, when you kind of like move on from that scene and you're now kind of like in Ithaca and looking back on that, are you still in touch with these people at this point, or is it much later that you kind of remake contact with all these people?
Yeah, not really. Once I went away from school, I kind of lost touch with all that, like that whole scene. Like, yeah, I didn't really stay in touch with those guys until literally I probably didn't talk to them for 10 years or something until I started kind of like had some distance and started doing a lot of stuff for Noisy and started writing these kind of essays about it. But yeah, I didn't, I also moved back to Cleveland after college to work at Alternative Press for 3 years. And I didn't really see those guys. I was kind of more, in the AP kind of scene. And then I moved to New York like 9 years ago. So I haven't spent like a ton of time in Cleveland, but yeah, I didn't really stay in touch with most of those people.
I can imagine. Yeah, but as you say, they've all kind of like, but even then, like they were kind of like moving on. Like they owned a sun tanning studio and rode weird motorcycles, according to legend.
Yes. No, they did. They had like those like Kawasaki Ninjas and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true.
It's also amazing that here's this group that's like totally buy American, yet they're riding Japanese motorcycles.
It was also funny. Like, I feel like they would like come to like my high school, like I would go to the mall with them or hang out, and they must have just like looked so funny for these like enormous guys in Tommy Hilfiger and me, like this like 120-pound dude in like Jinkos, like just kind of trailing behind. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, I remember them like sitting down at like my parents' kitchen table and being like, we're going to take Jonah on tour in Europe and all this stuff. And I was in high school. I mean, like, my parents have always been really cool about everything, but yeah, it must have been so strange from the outside.
I can only imagine. Like, but once again, we talked about this on the show before, but hardcore's really the only place, and I guess maybe punk too, by extension, where there is no like age differential between friends. Like you can be friends with like as like a 13-year-old with like a 50-year-old and just like platonic friendship. Totally.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that.
But it is, now being a parent, I'm like, I wonder what I will think when my child starts bringing home grown-ups to chill with.
Yeah, no, I can't even imagine.
Well, I guess I kind of also just want to go and talk about specific bands from Cleveland too. If you want to, like, I could just go on about Cleveland forever. So we could also go on, but I want to have you back for a part 2. So why don't we save all New York stuff for part 2?
Sure.
Just wallowing in the glory that is the great Clevo hardcore scene from the 90s. Did you ever get to see Integrity on Seasons the Size of Days? Because that would have been the record, right?
Yeah, I believe I did. I saw someone actually posted this flyer recently. I saw a show where Warzone opened and Integrity headlined, and there were like 5 bands. And I think that was like Seasons era or right before. I think that's because, I think I got into them right after Humanity's a Devil. Like they would always open with Vocal Test and stuff. But yeah. And at that point, they were playing with One Life Crew a lot, so I guess they were friends at that point.
Yeah, and then I think that was like, that's how One Life Crew would wound up on Victory for a while.
Right.
Was through the friendship and stuff. I kind of think Seasons, that's like that might be my favorite Integrity record. Like, if I was being honest with myself.
I think Dwid probably sounds the production on that one's really good.
That's right. Maybe that's the thing. That's where he found his voice.
Yeah, I think vocally that's probably his best record from that era for sure. That's kind of like a little bit of a forgotten record. I feel like, Those Who Fear Tomorrow, Systems, all that stuff's been reissued and kind of, but yes, people don't really talk about that one as much.
No, it's like, and I think it's also because they did switch over to Integrity 2000 and maybe they didn't, I don't think they toured it very much. They certainly didn't come to Canada ever until much later. But on that record, they definitely didn't come through. so yeah, maybe it's because he didn't tour it and stuff. Like, and also, I could tell by the hesitation in your voice, you don't share my opinion about that record, but I find that with a lot of people. A lot of people don't.
I mean, I just don't listen to it as much. I like it, but yeah, I just kind of, I mean, I feel like for me, I just, like to me, Those Who Fear Tomorrow, just like those songs are just so ingrained in my body that like, that's just the one I kind of just usually put on. But I just got, Brent at Magic Bullet just sent me those reissues. So it's like Den of Iniquity and Unanimity. And some of that stuff is really cool because I had all those 7-inches, but like, yeah, like that Kids of Whitney High split, like a lot of those kind of songs, I was like, oh, this is actually like that weird Jagged Visions 96 thing.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's sick. I love that like, that's the thing is like, once again, I guess we shouldn't really go into it, but the Kids of Whitney High split, like that is totally a reflection of Answer Me fanzine culture, like the prevalence of it in hardcore, I think.
Yeah.
Answer Me, they interviewed the Kids of Whitney High, and then it's like, then Integrity to the split.
You know what? I worked on Warped Tour for AP for a couple of years, and one of the California shows, the Kids of Whitney High played.
Yeah, because they did a record afterwards on Ipecac.
Oh, right.
And like toured it out, toured out a little bit, but I don't know if that's the original. I don't know if it's the same kids that would have done the Integrity. I believe it was a school for music.
Right. So maybe it was just whoever was in that grade or whatever.
Yeah, at the time, I might be mistaken on that too. But I remember like there was the interview with the kids in Answer Me, and then Dwid in Blood Book didn't. I don't know if they did an interview, and I think that might just be a bootleg. I don't think the Kids of Whitney High were really contacted for their permission to be on that release. I might be speaking on that one, but
yeah, I mean, I think that there were so many kind of like more obscure, like like songs from like that Victory Picture disc, and like all this stuff I kind of had forgotten about on that Den of Iniquity thing, and then I had that Hooked Lungs, Stolen Breath, Cunt picture disc.
Oh, what's on? Oh, the live thing that Lost and Found Records, I think, put it out?
Yes, Lost and Found put it out.
Oh, yeah. You never see that record. That's like, it never shows up.
Really? Yeah, I have that. Well, next time I go home, I'll take a picture of because I had like 8 versions of the Integrity Hatebreed split. Like,
wow, that you beat me on that for sure. I think I have like 4, but there were so many of that record.
There were so many. There was that one and that Converge Coalesce split. I feel like they put out in like 75 different colors.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of colors. Well, that's the thing about Integrity collecting. Like, at one point, I kind of had it on lock. Like, I knew what I had and what I needed. But then, like, sometimes I'll see kids on Instagram post pictures of their Integrity collections. I'm like, there are like thousands of Integrity records now. Like, thousands and thousands.
I think I had everything, like, especially all the Victory stuff. Like, I had Humanity on Red. I had like Systems Unclear. I had all that stuff. But I think Seasons was kind of the last. After Seasons, I think I maybe went to school and sort of like fell off of that a little bit.
Well, that's actually the end of Integrity. Well, like Integrity Mach 1. Well, I guess that's like several lineups in, but like sort of like the first real era of Integrity, because then they become like Integrity 2000.
Right.
And get the electronics, and I think that's when the Melnicks are gone. I think 3 Gun leaves at that point too. I think it's just Dwid and a bunch of new people in 2000.
Do you remember that band, In Cold Blood?
I love that fucking 12-inch. Oh my god, yeah.
I was in a band with. They had this guy Rich in the band originally, who I had jammed with. But yeah, who was in that? That had the Melnicks in it.
It was the Melnicks, and was that guy Rich the singer?
No, I think he was the drummer. I don't even know if he was in the band the whole time.
Yeah, because they had, it was like the Melnicks, and I'm trying to remember who sang in it too, but it was like someone else, but it was their way of doing a much more straightforward hardcore band. And that In Cold Blood 12-inch on Victory, it's like, that's another forgotten kind of classic.
I feel like someone reissued that and they played like that A389 or something.
Yeah, I think Dom did on A39.
Yeah, but they also had a 7-inch, the first thing they put out, which was like a guy like holding up a store.
Yeah, it's very rare. I want that so badly.
Yeah, I have that. I remember. I mean, I got it when it came out, but yeah, I saw them play once too. They opened for the Spud Monsters.
Oh yeah, Spud Monsters. That's another band we got to talk about. The whole Smogvale Records scene. But yes, was Spud Monsters? Is that ex Bagmen?
I don't really know. I mean, I just know that the singer was that guy Don Foose,
Yeah.
who went on to do a bunch of other bands, and I think was like maybe like part of like the Krishna kind of scene or something. But yeah, I didn't know a lot about them, but I know they were kind of part of that scene, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about that scene either. It's like that's like My Three Sons or something. I think was another band on it, and it's like
Okay.
all these like early '90s and Smogvale. Seems like a label that put out like they had their lane. They were putting out their records in their lane. They had and what's like there's one band that was on Smogvale that's like, is it Spud Monsters that was actually like really popular for a minute in Cleveland?
Yeah, they were pretty big in Cleveland. They had the song like "It's Garbage Night."
Yeah.
Like they were pretty popular, but I think they were like also a little before my time.
And there's some band that's on that label that was like I think like legitimately kind of like alternative radio play popular and stuff. But then Smogvale, of course, would then reissue that Rock from the Tombs record in the
right.
that kind of like and they now do a lot of like Perubu and they do a lot of like weird reissues too, or other new releases by those people.
Interesting.
I tell you, Cleveland, Ohio, it's an archaeological dig site that you can go on forever with.
Yeah, I mean, like some of my favorite memories of like Cleveland shows were at that place, Speak in Tongues.
Oh God, yeah.
Did you guys ever play there?
No, we never played Speak in Tongues. That was before Fucked Up got going. We played Now That's Class.
Okay, yeah, I played there too.
Which is still there. And
yes.
That actually, Paul is from Non-Commercial Records, who runs that place, is a Cleveland legend as well.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Speak in Tongues I can't believe that place existed as long as it did.
It's on. Oh, Speak in Tongues, yeah. Like, what was it? What was the story on that building? Do you know?
It was, yeah, I mean, because I was in a band for a little while. God, I forgot about all this stuff with this guy, Danny, and he lived there. Like,
yeah, people live there, that's right.
Yeah, he had like, you could kind of like walk in and there was like a stage and then like a bar to the left. And then if you went behind like a curtain on the stage, there were kind of like, I think there was like a downstairs, or there were bedrooms, and it was like super just like a mattress on the floor. But yeah, we would practice there. There were like practice room, but everything was just like so like just damp and dark and just like it was. But yeah, they would just have like these crazy shows. Like I saw Converge there. I saw tons of like Puncture Wound, all these bands, and it was like, yeah, you would just go, like, people would just bring beer, like, underage people would just drink, like, you would go on the roof, like, it was in a terrible, terrible neighborhood in Cleveland, like, people's cars would get broken into, and they would just have these insane shows, and, like, I remember one show, like, Nazis showed up, and, like, they all got, like, the chick kicked out of them.
Oh my God! You were at that?
I wasn't at that show, but my roommate Dan was at that show.
Yeah, the Ruiners played, and there's like so many famous stories that come out of that show. Yeah, where the Nazis got their asses handed to them. But
yeah, my friend Dan walked into that show as the fight was happening.
Holy shit! And yeah, there's like amazing quotes. I remember the quote that I've heard that someone said. I'm not going to say who, but they apparently stabbed one of these Nazis with their own knife and said, "Now I'm going to watch you bleed to death."
Yes, I know what you're talking about. And yeah, I guess one of my other friends, he walked in and just saw him crack an office chair over some Nazi's head.
Holy shit.
Yeah, but that I never really saw anything like that. But yeah, like those were the shows where it's like kind of like I feel like Cleveland people talk about where it's like, yeah, like people are just lighting off fireworks in the venue and like just complete just mayhem, and that place really sustained itself for a long time.
That's where Gordon Soley played their last show, right?
I'm sure.
That crazy show where he, I guess Tony Erba pulled a wrestling style blade job with a Rambo knife, and like nearly cut his face off. Like just there. I think the only time I ever went there for a show was I think it was the last Puncture Wound show. And
okay.
They were playing with Ruination on like the Ruination tour. And yeah, it's just like people lighting off fireworks. It was almost like, I think by that point, like going to a theme park where everyone was just like kind of over the fact that they were supposed to be crazy at every single show.
Right.
And we played Now That's Class and people were crazy again. It was I guess it's something in Cleveland.
Totally. But I do think Now That's Class is a much more like legitimate venue. Like Like, I just feel like a place like Speak in Tongues, to me, like that kind of like embodies everything we've been talking about. Like that nostalgic feeling where it's like, dude, you couldn't have a venue where it's like there's underage kids drinking, like people are doing, like it would get shut down now in like a minute. But it's like that era, you could sort of just like get away with that kind of stuff. And it was just like, to me, like that's kind of what made that era so special. Not the drinking, but just that sort of kind of freedom.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that in the age of like, not to get conspiracy theory or go down like some other podcast direction with this, but like in this era of kind of like self-imposed mass surveillance, everyone is dry snitching on themselves when they post stuff on social media. So it would be shut down so quickly because everyone would know about the fact that you could be underage and drink there. Like someone would post an Instagram photo of them drinking a beer and a firework going off in the background, and that would be the end of that place.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm at a muddle for words right now, apparently. Wanted to talk about Now That's Class. It's funny, too, because, like, we went on tour with Cloud Nothings years ago, and they were, like, Cleveland, and they were like, yeah, did you ever play Now That's Class? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, we played there. So it's like, the thing about Cleveland that's awesome is that even though these scenes are kind of different and separated from each other, there's always some sort of carryover. Like, they're all connected to one another. There's never, like, a hard stop from one scene. Like, people shared members, people played in bands with each other and stuff. Maybe not the first wave, because I guess a lot of those bands moved away, but certainly from, like the Dark sharing members with, Integrity, and sharing members with, like this band, which shared members with this band, like you yourself being in a bunch of bands with people in Committed, who are in bands with people in One Life Crew, or people in, like Chris Ringworm was in Confront, who was in Ringworm. Anyway, I could get down this rabbit
totally.
hole too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like it's like a big city, but I felt like it was like there weren't a ton of people into that kind of stuff, especially that era. So I feel like you would just go to shows and you'd be like, oh, you're into this, I'm into this. Do you play an instrument? Like, I feel like there was sort of like, you didn't have the internet. You couldn't really like, so it's like, yeah, to me, it was just kind of like an insular scene, but yeah, like everyone, it wasn't like, yeah, I felt like it was kind of a small scene. Like everyone sort of knew each other, but it's like, I'm sure if I went to a show now, I would barely know anyone. Although United Nations played there over the summer with Coliseum. We did like 5 shows with Coliseum, and like there were a bunch of people who I grew up with who came out to the show and hung out, who are still doing stuff. It was pretty cool, and they've all like, some of them do graphic design and all this other stuff, but they're still sort of go out to shows and that, which is cool.
Yeah, like I guess also that brings up another point. At its kind of like height, which is the time of these shows that you're going to, were these like really crowded? Like, where was that? What's that venue? Peabody's? Is that what it's called in Cleveland? Or
so that's where I saw a lot of the Integrity shows. That was Peabody's Down Under, which that was the original one, I believe, and that was in the Flats, which was this area on the waterfront. Which, like, when I was going to those shows, like when I was in high school, was like the most happening area of Cleveland. Like, you'd go down there on the weekend, and it was just venues. There's a venue, the Odeon was there, where I saw Dead in Cold Blood show. And there were all these bars. There was like a Hooters, and it was right on the water. And then I guess what happened is people kept dying because people would get so wasted at these bars and then fall into the water and drown. And so eventually all these places had to close. And then, like, last time I was home, I don't know, it's like now, is there like 5 or 6 years ago, Peabody's ended up becoming like, there was a Peabody's Cafe too, and then Peabody's ended up moving like more into the city, and it's kind of more of like a metal club. And it's like it was like a ghost town. Like the Odeon was like the last thing, and it closed, and you would drive through there and it was just everything was boarded up. But yeah, those shows were at Peabody's Down Under.
Yeah. So how big was that venue back then? Like, was that like, how big was it at the peak? Because like all these bands are, I guess what I'm driving at is all of these bands that we've kind of talked about are loom so large in this kind of music world. Yet, was it really popular at the time when it was happening?
Sort of, but I mean, I feel like it wasn't a huge venue. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, I remember seeing Earth Crisis there with like Bloodlet and like, like VOD or something. Like, it wasn't a huge venue. I'd say like maybe like, I don't know, like 200 or 300 people. But yeah, I mean, I feel like those shows were crowded, like especially like the local shows when like Integrity would play with like 216 or all these kind of bands, but it wasn't like a huge scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't like thousands of people or even like 500 people. It didn't feel like.
Yeah, because I saw Integrity at one of the many Joachim era kind of reunion shows that were after To Die For had come out, like when they were just kind of doing a bunch of other reunion shows over the years afterwards at Peabody's. And I was shocked at how, and this was the other Peabody's obviously, but I was shocked at how small it was.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that venue, I think the newer one is smaller, but it's not that much smaller. And yeah, I don't know, like, I don't like, I feel like me and you are the same age, but I feel like most people in like their mid 30s, like just aren't going to hardcore shows anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, so I wasn't, I don't mean it was like small as a crowd turnout. There was still a decent crowd turnout, but I mean like, I guess it was in my fantasy of what Integrity would be like to see live in Cleveland. I'm like, well, there's probably going to be like 1,000 people there. Like,
no, it wasn't. I mean, like, I don't remember ever like buying tickets in advance or anything. Like, yeah, you just kind of show up, pay like $10, go in. Like, yeah, I mean, it was crowded, but it was not like they were not like a huge. None of those bands seemed like huge bands. Like, yeah, like whenever I'd see One Life Crew Ascension, they would play at the old Grog Shop, which was like kind of tiny. So yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, but I'm sure it seemed from the outside maybe bigger than it was.
Did you ever see Ringworm a lot back then? Or?
Yeah, I saw them a couple times, but I feel like I've seen them so much recently. I think they play in Brooklyn all the time.
Yeah, I think they're much more of like like it seems like a way more functional band. Like they did that reunion in 1999 era. I think they got back together, but like I don't know if unless they were playing locally, I don't remember them playing a lot out in the mid 90s.
Yeah, I maybe saw them once or twice, but and I remember seeing Frank around and stuff. There's this place, The Fantasy, where a lot of those bands played in Lakewood. But yeah, not really. But yeah, I really have seen them a lot, probably more in like the last couple of years than I ever did in Cleveland in the 90s.
Well, and he has a tattoo shop, right? Or did?
I don't know. I don't know him super well.
Okay, I thought someone told me because he's an illustrator, he was a tattooist too, or had a tattoo
Yeah, that
shop.
would make sense.
Well, and I guess like we could go on forever. I want to talk to you about Sean Philly. I want to talk to you about so many more things in Cleveland and lots more, and also, everything you've done since then. But I think this is probably a good place to stop now before I subject people to direct discussions of your record collection and finding out stuff that you have that I need.
Yeah, we can talk about that on our own.
Yeah, we'll talk about that off air. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jonah. I really appreciate it, man.
No, of course, Damian. This is so fun for me. I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, anytime, dude.